An inch is a unit of measurement, and we can use inches to measure small objects. When you measure something with a ruler, it's really important to line it up with the 0. Right, this bolt is 1 inch long. We abbreviate inches as IN period. Let's measure it. This screw is a little more than 2 inches long. It's longer than the bolt. This nail is close to 4 inches long. It's the longest. So, how long is your birdhouse, Moby? That's a gigantic birdhouse. We should use it as a doghouse instead. Maybe you measured it using feet instead of inches. How can you measure using feet? For longer objects, we can measure in units called feet. Well, kind of, except we have different sizes of feet. If we measured with your foot, we'd get a different measurement than if we measured with my foot. That's why we have one standard foot that is the same.
Or standard unit of measurement.
This ruler is 1 foot long, which is equal to 12 inches. Let's see. Your doghouse is about 1, 2, 3 feet high. This is the abbreviation for feet. FT. I guess there are tons of ways to measure. Maybe in a few weeks we can measure Selden again and see if he's grown. Nice hat, Moby.
Okay, so now what she said about making sure that we line up with the 0, that's pretty important because, again, that's why we have a standard unit measurement so everybody knows what that measurement means. So if I was going to draw a squiggly line and wanted to measure it, but I started here, my measurement's going to be different than somebody else's. Let me show you. So if I started there, but somebody else started at the 0, they would have a completely different measurement. Now, let me show you that again. So that's why we need to make sure that we line up at the 0. So if you're going to measure something, you might want to measure to the nearest inch or the nearest half inch. Well, to figure that out, because it doesn't always line up exactly to the nearest inch, you look where your inch ticks are. These are called tick marks. So this line, now remember with rounding where we talked about the halfway point, it's the same thing. This line extends to about right here. Which whole number is this line closest to? Well, it would take a way longer time to turn around and run to that side, so it's closest to the 4. So you would say it's about 4 inches long. Now, the thing is with 3rd grade, we should be actually able to measure even closer, more accurately, to the nearest half unit. Whoops. So that means you know where the half mark is. Again, think of when you were rounding. We know that in between each end mark, there's that middle point, and it's always a little bit longer. You can see it on the inch one. See that little longer point. So what you do is you just simply line it up and you measure the line. Now think about it. Look at the half mark. We're measuring to the nearest half, so go to the half mark. Each of these are halves. If you're going to count by halves, you'd go 1/2, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4. So each of these is a half. So in between these marks, which one is it closer to? The half mark here. So that would be how many whole inches? 3. 3 whole inches. And then how many halves? 1/2. So the measurement of that line would be 3.5 inches. Now let's say I'm going to measure another line. I'm going to measure smiley faces. About how long are my smiley faces? Well, I started around my 0, so make sure you line up the 0. That's about right. Now, how far does it go? Well, I have 1, 2, so 2 whole inches. And then does it make it all? Let's look at the half mark. Oh, that's pretty far away. So it's actually closest to the 2. So even though it doesn't have a half in it, remember? 1 half, 2 halves, 3 halves, 4 halves. That's 2 whole inches. So the nearest half inch would still be 2 inches. Let's say add another smiley face. Now what does it measure to? Well, the nearest half is at the half mark. So it would be 2.5 inches. We can also measure in centimeters. And this is how the rest of the world works, where the United States uses inches and feet and miles and yards, but the rest of the world uses centimeters. And as you can see, they're a lot smaller. So one side of a ruler always has inches, one side has centimeters. So what I would like you to do right now is pause the video and use that tool I put on your sheet and measure the cat to the nearest half inch. It should be lined up to the 0 mark. The tail should already be lined up to the 0 mark. Now what I want you to think about is, what half inch does that cat go to? Make sure to think about his ear, because I think that's the part that's sticking out the furthest. You may now pause the video, use that tool, measure the cat to the nearest half inch or inch, and discuss it with your group. Welcome back. I hope that you all were in agreement. And if you weren't, you should have figured it out. So that cat is probably closest to 3 inches long. If you look at his lovely ear that sticks out, right about there. Okay? And this is the half mark. So would you say 2.5 inches or 3 inches? You should have said it's about 3 inches long. Okay, great. Now that you successfully can agree on measuring with the ruler, lining it up, and figuring out the nearest inch, you should also be able to do the half inch. So what I want you to do now is measure the pig to the nearest half inch. Remember, if you're counting by halves, these are all halves. Don't get confused. So would the pig be closest to the 2, the 2.5, or the 3? Pause the video, measure, make sure to write your unit, and discuss with your group. Welcome back again. I hope that you are all successful in finding out the length of this happy little pig. And what we know from our estimating and rounding, that this is a lot closer to 2.5 than it is to this 3. So that pig is about 2.5. 2.5 what? Inches. Great. Now I want you to turn your iPad off, and you may discuss with your group how to measure. You may measure other things. There are rulers in the bin. Once it's time to switch, you may take the sheet with you because you'll do the reflection at the end of math. Thanks. I hope that you feel like you are now able to measure, understand why we need a standard unit of measurement. And if you don't, make sure you explain to somebody around you, and you can measure to the nearest half unit. Yay.